Whether or not it's literal, it's a scenario. There was a Chinese businessman who was taken by Chinese police in, I believe, Taiwan, 2017. Do you remember this? And the thing was, it said he was okay. Let's see if this is the reference. Oh, it's on CBS News. So the same affiliate where Rahm Emanuel now has a column has the first article that could possibly mention this factor. It says Chinese-born Canadian billionaire reportedly taken from his Hong Kong hotel by mainland police. Okay, this is not the way it was recounted at the time. He was not a Canadian billionaire at the time. But let's see if this is the same person, because there was more than one. There was more than one article on this incident. I see. Well, it's not talking about the matter that is of concern here. It's did they rewrite it? Did they backdate the specific incident? Because this would be the time frame we're talking about. John Francois Harvey, a Hong Kong based lawyer. You guys are so fucking artificial. I mean, you're lucky I'm not that kind of a bitch. You can't even grow your own tips, can you? Right? They're not your tips, they're fake tips. Somebody else has to put them on for you. I'm sorry. Let's try this again. Maybe I have the wrong one. Let's try this again. Let's put in the extra modifier. Ah, now it's for a different day. See, during this time, I would have been on my way to encountering. This is the New York Times. No. A video, a wheelchair, a suitcase. You mean an attache case? You mean a mobile assistance device? Would that be considered durable medical equipment? A video. You don't mean like maybe it wasn't a still shot he took on his phone? I see. Okay, Four Seasons Hotel, police custody in mainland China. This one is stated for exactly 10 days after the other one. And I want to thank you so much right now. This is exactly the kind of evidence I need for what? How long? 3 hours? Let's make sure I get this right. I don't want you to. John Francois Harvey. So who is this supposed to replace? Which Harvey are you trying to replace? It's not U.S. versus Harvey. You already tried to do that. See, it's really nice if you don't really know what happened in that situation. It's really nice because nobody's going to challenge it. Who even knows what happened with that, huh? Who even knows about that? You know what I'm saying? Who even knows about U.S. versus Harvey? I didn't get to even put it into my argument. I was so stupid. I'm so sorry. I thought that when you requested a case that at some point you got to go to court and or maybe you were supposed to follow up with a greater explication, including a list of evidence and how that evidence was actually substantiating the charges. But then you need to actually have a evidence verification process and a way to log it in and a way to verify the evidence, because you have any idea how much has gone into challenging evidence procurement and evidence classification. And actually, I'd written a report about that. Yeah, I did. And it was in this notebook. And I mean, the notebook got stolen. But that's not the point. And so, 10 days after the CBS News report, which would be teared to Brooklyn, we've got the New York Times in general. So, it's kind of like what the neighborhood gets big time play. I mean, the New York Times is actually very important, especially if you do things like what I did and like go through microfiche libraries and you compare things like the Western edition with the Eastern edition, and you see that what's printed locally that gets circulated here in Texas is completely different than what the microfiche said got printed on the same day for the Eastern edition, which would be the actual edition in New York. And where here they're focusing on a particular kind of characterization of events at the moment. Over on the East Coast, it's completely different. And that what was talking about housing matters here locally, as well as other sorts of matters here locally, was characterized totally different in what the microfiche says was happening in New York at that time. And when there was supposed to be discussions about matters related to mainland China and business endeavors that were ongoing in February, March, that around the same time on the East Coast, at least according to the microfilm edition, they had completely different understanding. They weren't talking about the Chinese relationship with the American real estate market. They were talking about somebody who's a co-investor with one of the president's sons-in-law, and the Chinese reference had to do with cryptocurrencies and gaming. Gaming and cryptocurrencies. Why would they have such a completely different version being acknowledged as what was the official record of the time for the Eastern edition, where what was actually in the print publication here was totally different? See, it would have made a big deal if, as I understood, someone had actually taken out treasury notes in connection with things that had gone on with me in my high school graduating class. And I was supposed to spend that year doing something so that when those notes matured, me and my class would be free. We would no longer be hostages of the Iranian student movement. But, I mean, all of that got stolen. And I don't know how many of my classmates were here with me in Texas and had that paper edition, which is what I got set up with, versus whatever was allowed to be printed, insofar as that microfilm would have been correct about that actually being what was the print publication on the East Coast for the same time, right? I'm sorry, what do I got to work with here? So the New York Times right now, it's noon on the 26th. This is a great time to be doing this. This is a great time to be having an ex-com that could be brokered through somebody who was a mayor in another city but has a column. Does he have a column today? Does he have a column within 10 days? Does he expect to have a column in 10 days? Because I'm going on a 10-day. That's actually somebody else inserting their 10-day into mine. So is Rahm Emanuel expecting to have a column or a news broadcast within 10 days of today? That is delivery on something that is supposed to be a recapitulation, a kickback of his own personal ex-com for all his hard service? I know. You want me on the other coast. I'm sorry, I digress. This is part of what happens. So, mysterious billionaire vanishes from Hong Kong. Let me give you the story as I understood it at the time. So there was this white girl in Houston, and she was standing in line at this food shelter, and there were guys on either side of her trying to hustle a drug deal. She was standing right in between them, and they're talking over her about getting access to marijuana. And then the understanding was once they got the access to marijuana, they'd be able to meet up, and then at some point they might be able to get in touch with that other guy who had access to something that wasn't marijuana, but that, would go a lot better with the marijuana. And she gets mouthy. And she's like, no, excuse me. And she says something as if to say that's not going to go through. Unfortunately, there's this cop who's working security at the shelter, and he hears her. And she's only a couple people away. She gets up there. She gets up to the door. And then the cop says, "We know who you are." What? You need to leave that out here, as in your attitude. And she's like, just looking at him. So he takes the ticket, because you need to get this food ticket, and you need to give it to the guy inside. And he takes the food ticket, and he puts it right on his dick. Now, he's got pants on, don't get me wrong. He's wearing pants, he's wearing the belt, he's got his sidearm on, he's got his badge on, he's got his uniform on. He takes that ticket, and he puts it right above his dick. Now, technically, the truth of the matter is, that ticket's got a number on it. And the literal location is right in front of what would be his pubic symphysis, right? It's that little tiny, cartilage piece that brings the two hip bones together. Yeah, they do a lot of interesting stuff with that. Including, ding you, and then let somebody put a fucking code bar on your pubic symphysis. And so you're supposed to demonstrate your loyalty. And that's where you put the ticket. And so she wasn't going to escalate. She didn't say anything. She went to grab the ticket. Well, he held on as if to let her know. So she grabbed the ticket. I believe the implication was she was supposed to say something to acknowledge his authority verbally, like a crypto handle. Like she was supposed to say something, ask something, maybe say something mouthy. She didn't do that. She just grabbed it and pulled it. And when she did, oh, he was pissed. Now, after that, it gets X rated, so I'm not going to speak about that right now. But that day, with all the other things that happened, there was allegedly an event where the Chinese police had to go into a hotel and they had to apprehend a fugitive who presumably had multiple female bodyguards that were also taken into custody with him. Is that who you decided you were going to defend? Are they bodyguards? See, I wasn't a bodyguard. Was he? Was he a bodyguard? And I did not respect his authority? And now your ladies are disappointed because they're not getting the compensation they had been promised. That's where it's been. Right? Now, after that, all of the news items about the reprehensible conduct of the Chinese police and their acts of brutality that engaged in extrajudicial process around intimidation of leaders of the business community changed. And then there were all these stories about how rather than the Chinese police being capable of actually having these kinds of intercessions with criminal activity, including in acts of national expropriation, all of a sudden the cops are incompetent. Let me ask you, if I had given him a crypto, just like he told me he wanted in his own special way, would the cops have had a better reflection? See, I was supposed to believe that I had done something really bad. I ended up going somewhere, and there was a huge transmission that happened after he put his hands on me. You know, that's the last time anybody's touched me. And I cried. I cried violently. For nearly a half hour, I had to go into the bathroom, and I was in physical pain. There was all of this transmission, and a lot of what I saw were women. Mostly dark-skinned African women, or African American women, who had been told that if they engaged in acts of prostitution, that they would be rewarded. That they were literally being recruited as part of the Super Bowl scam to engage acts of prostitution. And that had been going on for a while. That this was a recurrent process. That women were recruited to engage in acts of prostitution, including as kickbacks to the cops. And then every once in a while, they'd have to go do some social work. They'd have to go do some social work as part of these deals that the cops helped broker. And the promise was that if you did these deals enough, and if you did it when they told you to, then you might get better accommodations. And somewhere down the pipeline, something was being hooked up for them. And I could feel this and I could hear this, and I was crying in excruciating pain. It was so embarrassing for the people whose room I was in. There was a person who actually had the room, and then there was another person there who claimed at some point she had been an attorney. Both of them had a legal background. And they were kind of uncomfortable, I could tell. They were uncomfortable with me crying. I had bruises, but they've already taken the pictures away. They probably put it into the X-rated ones that they made after I got past the guy with the ticket at his crotch, right? So, I mean, we're here now. If you thought you were going to make me someone else in this little swaparama and you were going to defend somebody else in your database reprogramming, what are you reprogramming now? Because what I just saw is that you're going to use whatever it is. When I hit this website like this, it's very, very specific. It's very specific. And unfortunately, it fits a pattern. right? It really does. So, what are you going to do now? Is that what your idea of Cobra was? She's supposed to be sexy and slinky and sleek, and then it's okay if she's a little bit on the down low, and she has some sketchy clients. I mean, it's pretty much like being a lawyer, right? It's like being a defense attorney. Yeah, they might have actually committed crime, but even a criminal needs defense, right? Yeah, but that's not appropriate. You don't get to strategically murder people so you can steal their identity and then try to get somebody else to cover up for it. Are you afraid the Chinese police are going to come chase you onto your island and then they're going to take you back and they're going to treat you like you deserve to be treated? Are you afraid of that? Is that part of the terror? Is that why I'm a terrorist? Am I your Chinese cop? I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. Except I'm supposed to be incompetent, and I'm supposed to be brutal, and I'm supposed to be on the take with the mob so that the actual brutal cops on the take with the mob get their insurance with my face value. And you still, all this time, have refused to talk about bond fraud. All of you refuse to talk about bond fraud, which is why my face has a very different value than yours. But, c'est la vie, right?